Hello, and welcome to tonight's news. I'm your host, Martin Macker, and this is my fellow co-host, Adrian. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's get started. Today, we have breaking news that America could be pulled into the bloody war taking place in Europe right now.
That's right, Martin. The government just intercepted a letter from Imperial Germany to Mexico. Germany promised Mexico our lands of Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona in return for the Mexicans to fight for them. It seems now that America is in the path of war. It doesn't help that American people were outraged at the sinking of the Lusitania on the shores of Britain, killing American citizens.
That doesn't sound good at all, Adrian. America is bound to be heading into war, but what do the people think about it? We have eyewitness reporter Tate on the line now, who is interviewing a concerned citizen about it.
I'm here on Washington Street to find out whether the people think America should enter the war with Europe. We have
John?
Here. Sir, tell me, do you think America should enter the war with Europe?
Well, I think that Europe had it coming for a long time. The war is just too big for America not to get involved with. I knew this was coming from the very start, by the way. When Europe started forming large alliances, as alliances are tricky. If one country goes to war, it pulls the whole alliance down with it. And so the war path started. My belief was solidified when all of the countries started militarizing, and the German war crimes in Belgium are something we can't just stand by and watch. To answer your question, Mr. Reporter, due to all of these alliances, this war is the biggest we have ever known, and we can't stay out of it. In my opinion, I will kick those German...
Thank you, sir. Very good insight. Well, you heard it here first. The war to end all wars has been coming for a long time. Back to you, Martin.
Whoa, that does not sound good.
In other news, how does Woodrow Wilson, just elected to a second term, handle this pressure? Will he succumb to the people? We will throw it over toward the political corner in an attempt to answer the questions and to review how Wilson got here from his first election in 1912.
Thank you, Adrian. Hello, I am Tate, and this is Christian. In order to answer this question, we have to start at the roots of Wilson's regime, the election of 1912. The election of 1912 is where our standing president, Woodrow Wilson, showed his first signs of being one of the greats. Woodrow Wilson held to a policy of maintaining peace, which was highly frowned upon by other people who wanted war. But the public recognized Woodrow Wilson's peacekeeping policy. Wilson's goal was to avoid war, although the national attitude was itching to enter it.
The election of 1912 was just messy politics all around. Very sloppy, especially on the part of the Republican Party, which split its vote between the nation's favorite tough guy, Teddy Roosevelt, and William Taft. William Taft was a progressive politician who supported lowering the tariffs in order to break monopolies and also create more competition among businesses. However, he passed the Payne-Aldrich Tariff Act, which instead of lowering tariffs, continued to keep the high price of tariffs which benefited the bigger companies.
Taft did end up winning the nomination, and an angry Roosevelt stubbornly walked out and made his own Bull Moose Party, which pulled apart the Republican vote. After so many successful presidential campaigns, the Republicans must have thought that they could win, even when split in half.
This left the election an easy win for the Democrats, with electoral college votes of 435 for the Democratic candidate Woodrow Wilson, 88 for Teddy, and 8 for poor Taft. Taft's poor PR and the Republicans' vote split between the two Republicans had led to the victory of Woodrow Wilson. Wilson went on to create the Federal Reserve and Federal Trade Commission.
This election was huge. It marked the second Democratic win for the executive branch since the Civil War. But what's important here is all of the political similarities between the candidates, despite the differing party affiliations. Almost all of the candidates had the same stance on foreign policy, with the exception of Roosevelt. But even Roosevelt's big stick policy of threatening war and intimidating countries with military power isn't that far off from Taft and Wilson's dollar diplomacy, of using their economic power to get their way. The difference with their policies is how Teddy had the Navy of the US, the Great White Fleet, tour around as a show of force to basically back up negotiations. Taft would, instead of using force, use money to pay for his political interests.
This election came down to a difference in domestic policies. Teddy and Taft both had similar trust-busting domestic policies, while Wilson's New Freedom policy was just so much greater and more well-rounded. This plan included creating the National Federal Reserve, he created progressive child labor laws, he created the Federal Trade Commission, and created the first graduated income tax. These are just a few of the promised goals, but all of which he instilled or created within his first year of office. It was clear that the American people wanted something new, and with the Republican split, it was clear who was going to win the presidency in the election of 1912.
So it's clear how Wilson made his mark on the American people when the opportunity presented itself. He even ran for a second term with the sole fact that he kept America out of the war with Europe. But with constant mounting pressure, do you think Wilson will continue to keep America out of the war, or will he be forced to join it, especially if we have more events like the Zimmerman Telegram and the Lusitania?
Well, Tate, I think the answer is clear. If Wilson wants to solidify his place in history, the only thing left to do is make the world safe for democracy. And the only way to do that, at this point, is to show those filthy Germans their place. Going to war may not seem like the greatest option, but it's the only way to make sure America comes out on top.
Thank you. And more news. Women have increasingly gained attention as they grapple for equal rights to men.
That's right. There has been a steady increase in women-based organizations recently. According to news reports, groups such as the National American Women's Suffrage Association, the National Association of Colored Women, and the National Association Opposed to Women's Suffrage has been getting a lot of attention as of late.
Of course, you cannot leave out the recent push toward limitation on alcohol. Right now, we have Sergio at a gathering of men and women, a part of the Women's Christian Temperance Movement.
Yes, Adrian, women have been taking enormous steps in having their voice heard, and currently they are protesting right outside the White House to try and pressure the government to agree upon the 18th Amendment. Here I have John, who will take about his feelings about this whole situation.
Hey there. There's been a lot of important people talking about how alcohol will not make you better, but Jesus saved us all for a reason. We Christians believe that all you're doing is destroying your body by drinking this juice. In all honesty, it is not keen at all to be looking like a pitfall while vomiting all over the ground. People like Jane Addams and Charlotte Brown didn't sacrifice everything for all of you to just drop dead. These women have been working so hard to make sure you won't have heart disease or other forms of diseases that come with drinking alcohol.
How long have you guys been out here?
We've been out here protesting for months already, and the government seems like they don't want to listen to us. Hopefully they finally open their ears and listen to the little folk for a while.
Now we have seen a recent upsurge of men and women who are advocating for women to take a higher place in society. Why do you think there has been more and more people starting to stand by these unpopular opinions?
Well, you see, all the men, maybe even me, will be going off to war soon, according to all these government people. When they go to war, who's going to work the fields, run the general stores, the industries? Women. They will finally get to prove that they can work alongside men and maybe even better. This is why people want women to be righteous, because they have been waiting for so long, and now the opportunity is rightfully here.
Thank you for your insight. That is all over at the White House. Back to you, Adrian.
Thank you, Sergio. And now into modern efforts at conservation.
Many mining companies have been destroying several locations and on wasteful mining practices. Most of the natural resources have been controlled under private companies, and conservationists demanded for the federal government to stop wasteful American tradition. Thankfully, John Muir had managed to influence Theodore Roosevelt and bring concern to the problem of waste of raw materials. New acts like the Newlands Act of 1902 raised funding for irrigation from the sale of federal land in the West. In spite of all the issues surrounding the environment, patriotism grew with many Americans, and women played a big role in receiving patriotism to conserve nature.
The environment was taken to serious monitoring of the Federal Forest Division, the National Society of the Daughters of the American Revolution. During the Progressive Era, one of the most prominent people in politics to start environmental conservation was Theodore Roosevelt. At the time, Theodore Roosevelt believed that many of the forests that were being torn down in order to make housing in those areas should be preserved and controlled by the federal government.
Finally, we'd like to address the newfound prominence of muckrakers, journalists quite like us who investigate and expose the corruption so that people can band together to fight against those infringing on their rights. Large oil trusts and corporations are being exposed, and one example is the meatpacking industry horrors exposed by Sinclair's The Jungle, published some years ago. It's a fantastic read that I highly recommend.
That was the news tonight. Thank you, and we will see you later for the 8 o'clock news.